Well, this week we have thought about your epicenter, the very center of who you are. And more than anything else, God wants that part of you, and He wants that part of you to be free. Andy Stanley has said you can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. Now that's, I believe, a very profound statement, because the greatest thing that Jesus said we can do and must do is to love God. And yet it is impossible for us to love without giving, because giving and generosity is so central to what love is. God demonstrated that in His kind of love through sacrifice, through selflessness, through generosity, and of course the most obvious example of that is the gift of His Son, Jesus Christ, when He went to the cross and gave up everything for us. Talk about generosity. And if that doesn't get your heart and get into the very epicenter of who you are, I don't know what will. If we can just let that truth wash over us and recognize that God did all of this to free us from this bondage that we so often find ourselves in. The Pharisees and the priests in Jesus' day were people who looked very good on the outside, but Jesus refers to them when He talks about the story of all these people going to the temple and giving to the treasury. They gave gifts in that treasury, and they came with their fancy clothes and all of the gifts and large gifts, and they would pour in their bags of money and it would jingle and clang, and Jesus and the disciples off to the side were in awe. Of course, the disciples were in awe of the large gifts that were given. And then Jesus must have noticed a little widow walking up to the treasury. Most of the people wouldn't have even noticed her, but Jesus did. And you can almost see Jesus saying to His disciples, He elbows them, just watch what happens now. And she walks up to the treasury to give her offering at the temple, and she drops in 2 tiny little coins. Cling, cling. And she walks away. You can almost imagine the tears beginning to form in Jesus' eyes. And He turns to His disciples and He says to them, "This woman gave more than anyone else gave, because she gave out of her poverty." That is just a fascinating story and example of generosity. And this woman did that out of the love in her heart. Jesus was deeply moved by this demonstration of love, because it came from the center of who she was. And it didn't matter what she had or didn't have. She was generous. Generosity is one of the most clear examples of how we become like God and are most like God. We are most like God when we give. Materialism, unfortunately, has gripped the heart of many of us who are in the American church and American Christians. It has gripped us. It has enslaved us and imprisoned us. We give so little. Some of the statistics are astounding. Only 2% of those who claim to be born-again Christians tithe. 2% give 10% or more of their income. Less than one half, or more than one half of the Christians in churches give nothing to the church. Absolutely nothing. This is astounding. In fact, today there is a smaller percentage of Christians who tithe than the percentage that tithed during the Great Depression. So what does this tell you about the state of American Christianity today? It is astounding, really, that materialism has crept in unawares to us in so many ways, and we sometimes tend to poo-poo those statistics. We sometimes overlook the fact that we are not living a lifestyle of generosity the way that God says we must if we are a Christ follower. Now here's the key. It's not that you and I try harder to give more. It is that we most of all make sure that God has our epicenter, the very heart of who we are, that we open ourselves up to Him and let Him do this very real miracle in us, where He wants to free us from the bondage that enslaves us right now. As Isaiah prophesied, He came to set the prisoners free. And Jesus wants to do that for each one of us, because He knows that when our heart is set free, when our hands are open, our heart is ready to receive what God has for us. And He wants to set us free. The thing that God wants to do in our lives more than anything else during Quake is this profound and miraculous work in the very core of who we are. God wants that to happen in you. And I pray that it will happen to you. And as you spend time together in your small group tonight, I just encourage you to be open and to be honest about the things that God is doing, or the things that you want Him to do, or the things that you're even afraid of Him to do in your life. But He wants the very center of who you are. He wants your heart. I want to just end with this sort of sobering verse that Jesus gave us. It's in Luke. He says, "No one putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of heaven." Now, growing up on a farm, I know a little bit about plowing. It's hard work. And the idea that Jesus is talking about here is that you go to the field. In other words, you have a task to do. You get on board with Jesus. You say, "Jesus, I'm going to follow you." And you get into His field and you begin His work. But then after you're working, you look back and you say, "You know, I kind of liked it better back there. I'm not sure I really want to be here anymore." And Jesus said, those who look back, wishing to have what they had before, are not fit for the kingdom of heaven. Now, I want to challenge you to wrestle with that concept a little bit, even tonight when you're together in your small group. What does that really mean for you in the area of your resources and your material things and your finances? So God bless you as you spend your time together this evening.